Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the News Brief. Today is August 14th, and we're going to be talking about all the things that are happening before the meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska, or effectively the end of Putin's global isolation. And of course, we're going to discuss it together in the comments, so you don't have to suffer alone, and boy, I don't have to suffer alone. So if you have anything on your mind, anything to say, please leave it down below and I'll read all of it and I will try to respond because I love this back and forth communication. Let's go. So on the agenda today is the defense of Pokrovsk. The situation remains critical, however, with small groups of Russian soldiers repeatedly infiltrating the city, or, well, what's left of the city. But Ukrainian defenders stand firm. As the co-host of my podcast, Unmasking, if you haven't seen that one, and an incredible combat medic in Ukraine has said yesterday, people say there are 5 to 10 Russians or 10 to 15 Russians in a basement somewhere in Pokrovsk. It's not that bad. And her response is, it's 10 to 15 Russians too many. Because, yes, of course, it's not that bad. It could be worse, but it exhausts our defenders. It continuously creates tension situations. It continuously creates situations in which our defenders need to risk their lives for 10 to 15 Russians. And Pokrovsk is barely holding on, but we are still there and we're still fighting. There is also a very difficult situation in Dobropilya, and there are some areas of the front that are struggling right now. In a more positive turn of events, Ukraine struck Lukoil oil refinery, which is Russia's biggest supplier for gas stations and for oil and gas in general. And Ukraine also targeted their air defense. Ukrainian drones successfully struck the Lukoil oil refinery in Volgograd, dealing another blow to Russian infrastructure. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Russian air defense is prioritizing protecting Putin's villa, the one in Valdai, and that's his residence over strategic facilities, which is, so funny, to be fair. It's not funny, but it's very funny because that's the essence of Russia. There are so many facilities of strategic infrastructure that Ukrainians would be hitting, and we're not interested in ruining all of his years of corruption and money laundering and stealing. And we're not interested in striking his civilian housing, even if it's a palace, even if it has guards and probably military there as well, knowing how paranoid he is. His residence in Valdai is really none of our interest. We're more interested in destroying things that are capable of directly killing us, which, I guess Putin is as well. But we are capable of destroying things that are capable of quite actually killing us. So I find it very funny. And it's, of course, speaks volumes to Putin and what his priorities are. He could be protecting crucial infrastructure, but instead he's protecting one of his many massive villas. And that is the essence of Russia and Russia's dictator and what matters to him most. Now, there are global protests in support of Ukraine that are emerging. Ukrainians worldwide took to the streets with the message, "Support Ukraine, because Ukraine protects you." Demonstrations occurred in early August in Milan, Madrid, Frankfurt, Heidelberg, Paris, Vilnius, Warsaw, London, Rotterdam, and Luxembourg. According to the UN, June 2025 was the deadliest month for Ukrainian cities since the start of the full-scale war, underscoring the urgency of these protests. Well, the demonstrations are happening because A, June was the deadliest month, as we just heard, and B, because of the talks that are coming up, right? Ukrainians want to remind the world that we're not giving up, so please don't give up on us because it is important, and it is important to show support. There are actually a lot of creators online on TikTok. Specifically, I'm going to shout him out because I know him. He's a friend of mine, and he's actually a great source of news. Joey Contino. He's a news aggregator, and he picks out and seeks out the most important news for the day. He's posting 24/7, and he actually asked people in Alaska to take Ukrainian flags and to come out to greet Putin to remind him that things are not so simple and that Alaska is not over here celebrating his little travel outing. Also, of course, people in America, and to some capacity, they're not worried, obviously, about Alaska being given to Putin, but at the same time, it It's kind of like a betrayal. It's a spit in their faces because, well, the U.S., while not being the signatory to the International Criminal Court, they have made the largest amount of arrests and usually are on the side of justice. And the American people want nothing less than to see Putin on their land, especially in Alaska, especially the native population of Alaska, while Putin is stamping posters and billboards all over the place in Russia saying Alaska is ours. And if you didn't know, there is actually a monument in Crimea saying, we took back Crimea. Now they should give us Alaska back. And it's not a billboard. It's not like a temporary measure. No, it's a monument. And it's been in Crimea since, actually, I don't know since when, but for a while now. Yeah. So in one occupied place, talking about wanting to occupy another place. Marvelous. There have been some updates in terms of Trump's stance on his meeting with Putin tomorrow when it comes to Ukraine. Trump's stance ahead of Putin talks during the meeting with European leaders on August 13th was the following. Donald Trump promised not to raise the issue of territorial exchanges in talks with Putin and stated that Russia would face consequences for rejecting peace. I mean, that part you can just go ahead and scrap because he said that so many times. And have we seen any sort of result coming from that? I don't think so, so I wouldn't hold my breath. However, some media, including The Telegraph, speculate that Trump might offer Russia access to Alaska's natural resources and even potentially control over the Ukrainian territories to halt the war in Ukraine. These reports raise concerns about concessions involving not only Ukrainian but also American territories. For now, these remain unconfirmed speculations. Yes, The Telegraph did come out with this report. The Telegraph did come out with this messaging. I would take it with a large grain of salt, even a rock of salt, a boulder of salt, to be honest, because every single news media is trying to give a scoop, something different than everyone else says, to be first, to make a revelation, to give you a peek into exclusive content. So there's going to be a lot of speculation and a lot of unconfirmed news stories right now, and there have been already. However, it does raise a very serious question because rumors are never born out of nowhere, and maybe he was considering that. Now, that is a huge blow to Alaska's territorial sovereignty because, as we just discussed, Russia wants Alaska back, and it's not a joke and it's not a drill. Secondly, I heard that Trump wants to offer Putin actually access to the minerals deal, aka access to Ukraine's minerals, which that in itself is absolutely abhorrent and unreal and ludicrous, because he has no such prerogative and there is no way that the United States can grant him access to that, because that and if they had the opportunity to do so, which they can't because Ukraine's constitutional court has to ratify it and they never will, but if they did, that effectively kind of takes out all of the boundaries that Ukraine has with Russia and puts Russian oligarchs in charge of Ukraine again, and puts Russian oligarchs in charge of robbing Ukraine's resources again, which is what Russia has been wanting to do, along with other things, for this entire time. So it would effectively just nullify everything that we have been fighting for and give Ukraine's resources to Russia under legal pretenses of legal control through loopholes. So that particular point in these speculations is just, as I said, abhorrent. I think that there is no other way to describe that. Now, the Coalition of the Willing and Support for Ukraine. Now there are also updates on the Coalition of the Willing, which is Ukraine's biggest allies, and their support for Ukraine. President Zelensky held a series of meetings with European leaders ahead of Trump's talks with Putin. Germany has allocated $500 million to fund the U.S.-provided military equipment and ammunition for Ukraine. Earlier, the Netherlands financed a similar package. While some European nations are preparing for potential conflict, others continue to ignore the threat. That being Hungary, for instance, or Slovakia. Anyways, we're not going to point fingers, even though we just did. Here is what the biggest issue with these peace talks is as of today. What Russia is going to be doing is they're going to be increasing their demands significantly to a ridiculous degree. And they're going to be posting those all over the internet. So you start discussing them and you start talking about how ridiculous they are. And their goal and aim is to then bring them back down to what they initially wanted, which is already ridiculous. But in contrast to these ever-growing demands is going to actually look like Russia is trying to compromise and make concessions for peace. So that's their little PR move, and I hope it's not going to work. There has been the new wave of propaganda that Russia has been launching online, and I've seen it on Twitter, I've seen it on Threads, I've seen it on TikTok, I've seen it everywhere. And they create Ukrainian accounts, and what they write from these accounts is that most Ukrainians, which Trump said, 80%, want peace. So most Ukrainians don't care for Zelensky, for Trump, for what they're going to be talking about. They care for peace, so they just want to sign a document and move on. That is absolute BS. Actually, in my personal podcast, we did a bit of a social study, and I asked 3 out of 3 Ukrainians in the room with me to record this podcast what they would do if that were to happen, and you can find out what their responses were through watching the latest episode. But I will tell you, none of us Ukrainians would be agreeing to peace on Russia's terms. Yes, we want peace. Yes, we want the war to end. Yes, we want to live our lives without Russian missiles targeting us every day. Yes, but not like this. Not on Russia's terms, because what these peace talks are offering is not peace. It's capitulation of Ukraine in one form or the other every single time. So no, we don't want peace like that. We're not Russians. We don't just blindly sign documents and agree as a herd to do something. We fight for ourselves and for our independence, and we have also been fighting for everyone's security for this entire time. So please, don't forget to keep fighting for us. And that's what I have for you for today. If you enjoyed this brief, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on all of your notifications, as well as, of course, send it to a friend, give it a like, it helps us in the YouTube economy, and leave your questions, suggestions, thoughts, and comments, and I will make sure to read them. Till next time.